Hello and welcome to Brussels for this special edition of Talking Europe. My guest today is José Manuel Barroso, the President of the European Commission. In an exclusive interview, Mr. Barroso will comment on Wednesday's EU summit here in Brussels. Agreed measures include a 50% haircut for Greece's debt, a recapitalisation of Europe's banks and an expansion of the EFSF, that's Europe's bailout fund. We're going to talk about all this in a moment with Mr. Barroso, and thank you for having us here at the European Commission.
My pleasure.
Now, before the meeting, leaders said that what they need at this stage is a bazooka to impress the markets, a bazooka to reassure their partners. Is it mission accomplished?
I spoke before the summit of a comprehensive solution, so to act on several fronts. Having a response for Greece, the EFSF, so reinforcing the firewalls, also the recapitalization of banks, some measures to enhance the stability and growth perspectives, and also reinforcing the governance in the euro area. All those points were covered, I believe, with credible proposals that have now been adopted, but now we have to concentrate on implementation. So a lot was done, and I think the results were rather impressive, better than expected, to be frank. But we should also now concentrate on the implementation of the measures agreed.
Now, in your recent State of the Union speech, you, in a way, criticized France and Germany for sidelining the EU's institutions, but also for imposing their view, their deals on their partners. Has it been the case again, this time in Brussels?
This time there was a real commitment to work together and to work with European institutions with the respect of all the rules we have in Europe. Of course, it is very important that France and Germany cooperate. These are the two biggest economies in the euro area. And so I'm the first one to ask them to cooperate and to have some convergence. The agreement between France and Germany is indispensable, but it is not sufficient. And so that's why I made all these appeals, and I keep making them, to work inside the community institutions, treating all the countries exactly with the same level of respect.
But haven't leaders sometimes used this crisis as a pretext to take back some of the prerogatives to the detriment of your Commission?
No, on the contrary. If there is an institution that has been reinforced in all this, is the Commission. If you look at the conclusions of the summit, you have more and more tasks asked to the Commission to perform. And recently we have adopted the so-called six-pack. It's the legislation to reinforce Stability and Growth Pact that gives more authority to the European Commission to monitor and to enforce the measures in terms of fiscal consolidation. Also, generally speaking, the economic policy. So, in fact, what I see now is a much greater awareness in our member states about the needs to integrate more their policies. And this is indeed indispensable. If we want to have a common currency, we cannot only have a monetary union. We need an economic union. And we are in the current situation in Europe today, not only because of irresponsible behavior of some people in the financial markets, but also because the governments of Europe did not respect the agreements they have done themselves. They did not respect the Stability and Growth Pact. They accepted very high levels of debt, and now they found in that situation. That's why we need reinforced governance, collective governance with the European institutions, with the European Commission, the European Central Bank, and all the other institutions.
Mr. Barroso, now let's go back to the conclusions of this summit. Banks were forced to accept what's called a haircut, a 50% haircut. That means they will have to erase 50% of Greece's debt. Now, this is the end of an old taboo. It's also a precedent. Aren't you worried that the banks, the financial institutions, will be scared in the future? They will think, well, after Greece, we could have Italy or Spain.
It was stated not only now, but already on 21st of July by all heads of state and government that the Greek case is indeed a unique, extremely exceptional case. And that was stated once again in the most formal way. Yes, because the levels of the debt of Greece are in fact incomparable to any other member of the euro area, and also this is combined with other structural problems. That is why I think it was a good solution now to have this kind of haircut, because now it gives more credibility to the path of the sustainability of the Greek debt. In fact, the decision was taken based on the sustainability analysis made by the European Commission and the IMF.
Now, when you talk about sustainability, the aim is to bring down Greece's debt to 120% by 2020. This is still twice the Maastricht criteria. Yes. Is it viable?
It is too high, but according to the benchmark and it's the opinion in the markets, this can be achievable to pay the debt, provided there is, of course, sufficient growth. This is why, at the same time I'm speaking about fiscal consolidation, debt reduction, I'm insisting on the need to have some measures for growth, not only through the implementation of the single market, not only through trade liberalization, but also through in public investment. And since those countries have no margin, no fiscal space for public investment, we have to use the European Union for public investment.
You're telling us public investment. We're being told that the coffers are empty in Europe. Where do you get the money from? Could it be through the so-called Tobin tax, the tax on transactions?
This can be part of it, but it's just a part of it. But in fact, some countries in Europe have fiscal space. And in fact, we can use the European budget to leverage investment with the European Investment Bank, with private investors for infrastructures in transport, in energy, in the digital agenda. So we are proposing now what we call project bonds. So for investment at European level to address the problems of the missing links in the infrastructure. So it is important to combine the structural measures to reduce the debt also with some measures for investment, because without growth, we will not be able to overcome the current situation.
And regarding the tax on financial transactions, are you optimistic that it will be implemented? We know that Britain doesn't want to hear of it.
No, Britain has been always saying that they are in favor of it, provided it is global. So I hope that they will not forget what they said, because they said, in fact, I was in the G20 in London, and that was a great campaign from Britain, that if it is a global tax, they will accept it. So our point is, if we want it to be global, we should start in Europe. And that's why the Commission has made a proposal. Now it's a proposal on the table, and let's see what comes of this discussion. But I think it makes sense to have this kind of contribution from the financial sector, because our citizens think, if we are making sacrifices, if we are making efforts, isn't it fair that the financial sector gives some contribution to the common good? I think it makes sense, and that will be very interesting, I'm sure, discussions.
Another measure at this summit, of course, is the expansion of the EFSF, that's Europe's bailout fund, which is believed to be increased to 1,000 billion euros. However, though, we know that the member states don't want to top up the fund, so that means we'll have to get money from the IMF, from emerging countries, including China, maybe Russia. Are we sure that they will be contributing?
Look, that is the estimate that was made. It's an estimate because, as you say, it is to be done also with other investors, not only European investors, and also private sector. But we believe it's a realistic estimate. We have $1.4 trillion or 1 trillion euros because we are using leverage effects. And this is considered realistic, and the proposal was made after contact with the markets, the market participants. And so let's see. Now, of course, that's why I mentioned the need to complete the work. We have taken very important decisions, but now some of those decisions have to be put in place.
In France, the socialist opposition says it regrets that Europe, I quote, is begging China for money. Is there a risk that China...
We are not begging anybody for money, frankly. But I think it makes sense in an interdependent global economy as we have now, where we benefit and we can also be affected by what happens in other continents, to understand that interdependence. So what we are saying, and I think it makes sense, it's logical, that countries' bigger surplus make a contribution also to the global financial stability because they are benefiting. China has been benefiting a lot from the openness of trade with Europe. Europe is much more advanced than China in terms of development, in terms of GDP per capita. The GDP per capita of China is much lower, let's say, than Greece. This is not the question. But the point is that some countries have accumulated huge reserves, also because of their balance, their exports, and that's great for them, and we very much are in favor of this. So it's important also that we now address some of these problems in a collective, cooperative spirit.
All eyes are, of course, on Italy at the moment. Italy with a debt reaching 120%. That's twice the Maastricht criteria. Now, yesterday, you received a letter from the Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi in which he commits himself to reforms. Are you confident that Mr. Berlusconi will deliver?
I am confident because not only there were some formal commitments made in that letter he addressed to me, but also the conclusions of the euro area by all heads of state and government. And now we have a system of implementation. We have received a mandate to implement with a precise timetable that the Italian authorities are going to give us the measures that have been agreed. And I think in Italy, people understood that it is important this to be done for the sustainability of their public finances and for growth and the well-being of the Italian citizens.
When you say you have a mandate, it means that in the future, countries that don't abide by the rules will be punished.
Yes, because it has to be done like that. It is important to have a system of sanctions to be credible. But not only that, and I insist, we need, in a monetary union, we need discipline and convergence. We need more integration. We need a system of peer pressure, but also some institutionalized system of sanctions so that the measures are credible. And in the past, this was not always respected by our member states.
Now, there was a lot of frustration at the recent summits, particularly from Britain or also Poland. These are countries which are not in the Eurozone. They feel that most summits have been focused on the euro. They feel excluded. They voice their concerns. Are we heading towards a two-tier, a two-level Europe where Eurozone members meet among themselves and forget about the rest?
No, because we have one European Union. All the countries of the European Union should join the euro. It's true that there are two. One of them is Britain that has an opt-out. So they have decided voluntarily to stay out of the euro. But they are a full member and a very influential member in the European Union. So what is important now is to combine what is something that is self-evident, is that we need a stronger governance in the Eurozone because those who have the responsibility of sharing a common currency, they need that. The markets demand it, but at the same time, keeping all the acquis, all the obligations and the duties of the 27 members of the European Union. And that is one of the tasks of the European Commission. We have to make sure that all the rules of the European Union are respected, and we will do so in full respect of the treaties.
You talk about the economic governance of Europe. Now, Herman Van Rompuy, who is currently the head of the European Council, will also be the head of the Eurozone. Isn't this an attempt by the member states once again to control this economic governance, to keep it in their hands?
It is precisely the same system we have in the European Union. We have summits of heads of state and government, and they have a president. And it makes sense that the president of the European Council is also the president of the summits of the euro area. But it is not those summits that are going to make the government of the euro area, because the government is an executive. The executive of the European Union is the Commission. The competences that went to the European Union level, these are our business. And the European Commission is the economic government of Europe. Having said this, I just want to welcome the fact that now the heads of state and government, they decided to meet more regularly to define the strategic and very important decisions. That's only natural. I was prime minister of my country, so it's absolutely indispensable that the prime ministers, the heads of the government, give a strategic orientation. But, of course, they cannot replace the executive if we want to be credible in terms of an economic policy.
Now, to compensate for the losses of the Greek haircut, banks have to be recapitalized. We're hearing about 100 billion euros. Now, we're hearing that European banks will be able to recapitalize themselves without the help of their governments. Is this your view? When you look at the situation in Italy, it seems quite worrying that they could do that by themselves.
Some will do that by the market. Some will need public funding. In fact, we have already established some backstops for some countries that need that to fund their banks, to recapitalize their banks. And this is, I think, the right way to do it. And if needed, they can also go for the EFSF, because now the new fund, reinforced, as we have been asking since January, that I've been pleading for having a reinforced stability facility, it will also be able to intervene for the recapitalization of banks.
Now, next week you will be traveling to the south of France for the G20 summit. Do you think that Europe will, for once, be able to speak with one voice and show their American, Chinese, Brazilian partners that Europe is united and knows how to deal with this debt crisis?
These decisions confirm that Europe, when it is really necessary, is able to unite and to show determination. So I think we can go to Cannes in a very good position, showing that we are putting our house in order and asking also all the other participants for a cooperative commitment to our global governance. After all, it was the European Union, it was during the French presidency, President Sarkozy and myself, who went to Camp David to propose to the President of the United States to organize his G20 summit because of the crisis that was originated in the United States in financial terms. And so we attach a lot of importance to these global governance efforts. G20 can be very important for global governance, and for that, of course, it is important to have Europe at the center of these global efforts.
Very briefly, we saw recently that the rule of unanimity is sometimes problematic. We saw it in Slovakia when you have to endorse a decision that comes from Brussels. Are you in favor of changing the rules?
Yes. I think it is important in some cases to go for a qualified majority.
Like the rules within the IMF, for instance? No,
and also in the European Union. Most of the decisions now in the Lisbon Treaty are taken by a qualified majority. The Commission makes the proposals and afterwards they are approved by the Council, by the Member States, by qualified majority, and also in the Parliament. And the paradox is that we have this general rule for the business of the European Union, but the euro area, that should be the more integrated, is precisely the area where the rule of unanimity applies. This, I think, it's not logical, and we should change it.
Making Europe more flexible. Mr. Barroso, President of the European Commission, thank you very much.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching this special edition of Talking Europe from Brussels. Thank you and goodbye.